Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Artist Activism Black History Book Club. I'm Alicia Dianne, and welcome to my channel. If you're watching from Facebook, welcome as well. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. I got a lot of people watching the little short that I put at the end of the last video, which I was just introducing the second part, which is this video. So today we're going to be doing chapter 5 of Africa 101, The Wake-Up Call. And the book is by Arikana Chihamborikwa. I hope I'm saying her name correctly now. But we're just doing chapter 5. So this is actually kind of a part 2 to the last book club that we did last Friday. I was going to do another one like more recently, but that's okay. We're here where we are now. And to be honest, I'm glad that we're doing it in a second part because this is a loaded chapter. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling this is probably the most loaded chapter of the whole book. It's a challenging read. It was hard for me to get through it. There's parts that I even felt like I wanted to cry in some parts because it was really, really just heartbreaking and sad to learn about some of the things. But I was watching a couple of documentaries lately, and it talked about like studying Black history and studying African history. Like, it's very challenging, and when you're doing this, you do have to give yourself breaks, and you have to like take time to just like let yourself refresh, let yourself regroup, and go back to get that information, because the information is actually so liberating to just finally be like, I'm not making this up. This is not like some phantom pain that I'm feeling, that I know that exists and comes from somewhere and stems from somewhere. And it does come from the fact that all of these atrocities have happened, and that I think the hardest part of it is that we're not informed about it. So it's liberating to know. It's hard and it's challenging to read about it, but it's incredibly liberating. And I just hope that you guys are going to stick with me through this chapter, because it is a hard one. It's a really, really hard one. And for that reason, I do want to I want to do something that I don't think I've ever done on this channel before. I want to say a brief prayer. And I understand that everyone watching is not going to be of my same faith, and I think that's okay. If you know who I am, I come from faith, and I feel like it does, and that's one of the things that also comes up in this chapter too, is just that conflict of the faith that oppressed people are taught versus, it doesn't say the verses, but it does talk about the way that faith was used against us. But I feel as people now who have the opportunity to read the entire Bible for ourselves and understand the full scripture for ourselves, and understand past that, can have the opportunity to have that awareness that it's not the same thing. It's not that tool that was used against us, and so much of it is about being liberated and about being free, completely free as a whole person, and having a full life. And yes, after we're gone, but also while we're here on earth. So let's just take a moment to just collect ourselves, because it's a very hard chapter, and I want to be able to do it and get through all of these highlights with as much strength and energy as possible. So Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to learn and educate ourselves about the histories, about the past, about so much information that we're not taught. And I just want to ask for your strength. I want to ask for your wisdom and your guidance to just help us to move through this, not only with eyes of sadness or fear or just pain, but also with the mind of liberation, to really fully understand and grasp the truth of history, so that we can take that and use those experiences that our ancestors have gone through, even our forefathers who are not that far gone have gone through, and use that as fuel to help us to push forward, help us to grow, help us to learn, help us to continue to engage in this fight for full liberation and full freedom that we all deserve, every one of us. And I just thank you so much for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to do that and giving me the space to do that. And I'm gonna go ahead and move into this chapter. Chapter 5 is the evils of colonization. That is the chapter. It says atrocities the settlers, colonizers committed against Africans. So it starts off with atrocities committed against Africans during colonization are scantily documented and rarely discussed. Africans were considered inferior beings to the colonial masters and were subjected to extreme inhumane treatment from them, much like what happened during slavery. Allow me to highlight a few examples. So the British loot law in Zimbabwe, which was formerly known as Rhodesia. The British arrived on the territory of Zambia in 1896, renamed to Rhodesia. The British South African Company demarcated and governed it until the 1920s. Rhodesia, as it was called then, was named after Cecil Rhodes, who was a maniac British colonizer, the BSAC's founder and managing director. So the British mapped out the country of Rhodesia into the regions based on fertility, soil, and the amount of rainfall. So Region 1 had the best rainfall and the best soil. Region 2 came pretty close to Region 1. Region 3 had poor rainfall and poor soil and was only good for cattle ranging. And Region 4 had no rain at all, or close to no rain. Soil was sandy, and it was infested with, I think this is called test flies, some type of flies. It says TSE. So if you know this word, I don't know if it's Desi flies or tet flies, and mosquitoes, and it was uninhabitable. So that was Region 4. So the British veterans of the School of the First, Second Wars and any adventurers, Britons were guaranteed 4,942 acres of land in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, plus any form of loot from the local people. So this is basically what they were doing when they were capturing the land, how much they were allotting to these British veterans of the First and Second World Wars. And it said to map out this land, the British man would get on a horse and ride in one direction on his horse until he became too tired and place a wooden peg there. So he would ride for an entire day, place a peg, and then repeat that action 4 times to map out a piece of land. Okay, so then this says the settler would storm into any village, usually in the early hours of the morning, and begin torching huts. Your land is now mine, the settler would then declare, and the settler did not care whether or not they went, as long as I'll read the sentence again. It says the settler did not care where they went as long as they left the now illegally acquired land. It says no sooner had they settled in one new parcel of land than another British man would appear and map out his land and once again force them out. And it says that is how the black people in Rhodesia were slowly and deliberately pushed to the worst parts of the region, that is Region 4. So that was like the dry, uninhabitable land. So they were forced out of all the farming land, all the good soiled land, and they were just continually pushed into those sections. And this process of marginalization continued into the 1950s. And it says at no time did the British ever apologize for dispossessing the Zimbabweans of their land. Well, and it goes on to say, in a brutal manner that they did, in fact, their descendants now claim the land as their own, and that they are the real owners of that land. And it says, while lynchings went on in Zimbabwe, perpetrated by British forces, African Americans were being subjected to the same lynchings and abuse in the United States. So it was also happening all across Africa, and it's talking specifically about Zimbabwe here. And it says there's also photos of that. There's a lot of photos in this chapter. I'm not going to show the photos because I don't think that first of all, out of respect for the deceased, because there are a lot of photos of the deceased victims that were murdered essentially during this time. And I do recommend that you get this book and that you're, even though the images are really hard to see or hard to look at, it's actual evidence in front of your face of like what happened. And there's a lot of photos in this book, and I'll talk about them as we go through it, but I'm not going to show them, just out of respect for the deceased, and also like I don't want to violate any guidelines. I don't want anyone who's young, too young to be seeing that kind of stuff to be, to come across this and see those things that shouldn't be seeing it. So get the book for yourself, and you'll be able to see exactly what we're going to go through. So it says, so for those African Americans who feel that they are suffering what's worse than any other Africans on the continent, here are the cold hard facts for you. The misinformation given in the history books and in the media is designed to keep us divided as a people. We are a wounded people, and we all need healing. So like the idea that that maybe Africans in the United States had it worse than Africans on the continent, the pain is is well spread out. Okay, the suffering, the abuses that occurred is very well spread out. So just know that we are tied in that way, that people on this continent and the people on the continent of Africa, we all experienced the same brutalization. And it goes on to show some images of Zimbabweans being lynched in the 1890s, and it also shows lynchings from Georgia and the United States. And another one that happened in Lawrenceville in 1911. It's and people smiling in the photos and people posing in the photos, some of them with hounds. It shows people with hounds, and it says, please don't wake. They put a sign on this man's foot that says, please do not wake. And it says, many natives resisted the displacement from their villages and fought the British looters. Many were labeled as rebellious, and they were tortured, beaten, shot, and killed. Some of the notable British settlers who perpetrated some of the looting of the land and abuses of the natives, yet are currently celebrated as heroes. So it talks about like people who were doing this, who were evil and awful people, but are portrayed in the same history books that don't teach us about this as, just the same way that Christopher Columbus is portrayed as, like, he was this great man who discovered these places, or who settled, quote unquote settled, but didn't settle anything. He was murdering people and torturing people and raping people and stealing their land. That's the truth. So it goes on to talk about Robert Baden-Powell, founder of the Boy Scouts, and the Girl Scouts. He was a British Army official in Rhodesia and was notorious for attacking, abusing, and killing the natives, so much so that they nicknamed him the Wolf That Never Sleeps. And it says a photograph of the natives in I don't want to butcher this one either, Matabeleland or Matabeleland. I can't say that properly, I'm sorry. And it shows people in this area being lynched, and the photograph was found in the diaries of this man, Baden-Powell, which are now in the National Archives of Zimbabwe. And it says, according to diaries, Baden-Powell, the founder of the Boy Scouts, kept the photos in his scrapbook and titled them The Christmas Tree. He titled pictures of Africans being lynched in trees as the Christmas tree. So there's a bunch of, I think everyone kind of knows now that the Boy Scouts is an evil organization. I've seen a documentary about it, talking about how many of the children there have been assaulted and molested and abused, and how this was occurring like all over, and it was just barely, and it even talked about how much they were trying to cover this up. So there, if you ever get a chance to see that documentary about the Boy Scouts, I would recommend it, because it kind of takes the wool off and shows that how corrupt this organization is. According to that documentary, it shows a lot of evidence that, the people that were going there were getting assaulted, and the leaders who knew about it were covering it up. Cecil John Rhodes, and Rhodes was, like we talked about before, he tried to name this country after him, but I was gonna say something. I have to watch myself to not swear. I'm trying to not say foul language, but sometimes I feel like it. And it says Rhodes was a mining magnate and a former prime minister of a Cape Colony, present-day South Africa. He killed millions of Southern Africans for diamonds and gold, which were found in South Africa. And he made millions off the backs of natives he forced to work, aka slavery, in the mines. So there was so much slavery going on in the mines all over the continent because there's so many rich minerals and people were not getting paid to work in these mines. There was slavery happening on the continent. And it says, and on the railroads. The lines needed to transport the diamonds and the gold of Africa. So whenever they talk about like these, you hear about these railroads being built. There's a movie called A Ghost in the Darkness. I don't know if you guys have seen it, about this man who, their whole like mission, and he's like this good guy and he's trying to build this railroad, and he's in Kenya. He's a good man, like, he wants to get back to his family after building this road. But these railroads were meant to steal easily steal from the mines that were, and transport the gold and the diamonds and all of these rich minerals that were coming out of the African continent. And these people who rightfully owned the land and everything on it were abused, and they didn't talk about that in the movie though. But anyway, I digressed. He killed millions of Southern Africans for diamonds and gold. He made millions off the backs of natives. He to work on the mines and the railroad lines. Needed to transport the diamonds and the gold out of Africa. Today he is celebrated through the Rhodes Scholarship. If you want to take that blood money. And if only people knew how he acquired his riches. You know what? The more I learn about this, the more I'm like, the royal family that's celebrated so much in England, and their collection of what do they call their royal jewels? All of those that big expansive library of crowns and whatever those staffs are called, and all of these things that they're all stolen. All of it is stolen. And I'm like, Queen Elizabeth just died how long ago? But she was alive for a lot of the colonial period and was okay with it. So before you celebrate the royal family, know that. Ernest Oppenheimer. I was like, is that the same Oppenheimer about the bomb? But it's a different man. I don't know if they're related. They might be. It's a very unique name. Ernest Oppenheimer, another Englishman in Southern Africa who looted and displaced many Africans from their lands. He was a miner. And let me know if I should, I don't know how I should be. I'm kind of reading it very to the point. I'm not really storytelling. I'm trying to just relay information, but let me know if I need to like put some inflections or something on it. I want it to be palatable so that you can actually get what I'm trying to say. He was a miner who made his fortune from mining gold and diamonds in South Africa. The land he acquired in Rhodesia was larger than the country of Belgium and an estimated 2,112,000 acres. 2,112,000 acres. That's how much land he stole in South Africa. Okay, so after Zimbabwe independence in 1980, his descendants were living in South Africa, and no farming was taking place on this 2 million acres. It's reported that his family would fly to Zimbabwe once a month to spend a couple of hours at the homestead for sentimental reasons. So they had just acquired this 2 million acres, and people are like, what the hell? The South Africans are like, what the hell? They literally have 2 million acres of our land, and they're just using it as like for a picnic once a month. And in the meantime, thousands of black Africans were squattering at the periphery of the farm, and Oppenheimer's family finally gave up the land in the mid 2000s. So that's very recently, after much resistance. And can you imagine 2 million acres? It's like, I don't know how many states that is, but I'm sure it's a few. And it says, those who it's sad to say that those who perpetrated the violence and theft on the land benefited immensely from the land over a century. When it came time to undo the wrongs, the righteous world says that the descendants of the perpetrators, who are white, should be compensated, while the descendants of the victims, who are black Africans, are not even considered for compensation. The same happened in the United States at the time of emancipation, and it was the slaves. At the time of the emancipation of the slaves, it was the slave owners who were compensated and not the slaves who had suffered for centuries. So I don't know how much of a fact this is known, because I don't know how long I've known this. But I think it's important for everyone to know. When we talk about reparations in the United States and the fact that black descendants of slaves are entitled to reparations that have never been paid, does everyone know that the slave owners were paid reparations? That's not talked about. That should be talked about a whole hell of a lot more, because how is it that it's so difficult and complicated to pay the now descendants of slaves when the slave owners were paid reparations? And let's not even talk about the next to $1 billion that Haiti had to pay France for their freedom and to get free from slavery. That's another topic altogether. But let's keep reading. The double standards are disturbing, and the world must take notes. This is not only wrong, but a serious injustice and abuse of human rights. The German Herero, Namaqua, and San genocide in Namibia. So Namibia was also a colony, and it was formerly known as Southwest Africa. So we'll talk about this country and the genocide that happened there, which it's just not discussed. So Namibia was given to Germany during the Berlin Conference. We also hear about German genocide of other people groups, but we don't hear too much about the German genocide of people in Namibia. So the country was known as German Southwest Africa. The Germans committed many atrocities against the Namibians, most notable of which was the ethnic cleansing of the San, Herero, and Namaqua people, also known as Nam people. So these are 3 different tribes: San, Herero, and Namaqua. Those are 3 tribes. Between 1904 and 1908. So the Germans forcefully seized land from the locals without compensation, forced them to work for free, aka slavery. Over time, the Africans began to rise in rebellion against the harsh abuse of the Germans and demanded their land back. The local rebellion escalated into a war in 1904. The Herero people attacked a remote white-owned farm, killing about 150 Germans. So this was like an uprising. They're fighting back. It says this did not go well with the colonizers. They sent the General Lothar von Trotha, who retaliated with brutal force and quashed the rebellion. The Africans retreated into the dry Kalahari Desert in Namibia. The German forces guarded every water source and were given orders to shoot and kill any adult African male on sight. Any adult African male, so that means anyone of a particular skin color was subject to just be shot on sight. And they also poisoned all the wells, so they were taking away water, and the water that was left is poisoned. And it says only a few of the Herero and Nama people managed to escape into neighboring British territories such as northern and southern Rhodesia. The genocide resulted in the death of about 70% of the total population of the Herero, Nama, and San people of Namibia. So an uprising of enslaved people that killed 150 of their slave masters and perpetrators, resulted in annihilation of 70% of their entire population. They died from mainly starvation, drinking from poison water wells, or being shot to death by the Germans. The German rule finally ended in 1915. So it says, with the defeat of South African forces, the colonizers were evil. That's what she says, and that's what's true. And it says, as as they departed Namibia, the Germans took some of the skulls and remains of the Herero and Nama people to Germany as trophies and for research purposes. So that not only did they kill all these people, they started sending the skeletal remains of these victims, and they took them to Germany. It says to date they are still holding onto human remains and are refusing to give them back to the descendants for proper burial. The Herero and Nama people have pursued a resolution to this matter in German courts and are asking for the remains of their ancestors for proper. How can you not give people back even the remains of their relatives for burial? That's kind of wild. And it says, as I write this book, I cannot help but wonder how a single skull of a murdered German soldier would have lasted in any of these African villages. The Germans would have stormed into that village and not only took the skull, but killed thousands of Namibians in retaliation. So much for human rights. I suppose that human rights do not apply to the Africans. And it says the Herero and Nama people have also filed a lawsuit and are demanding reparations from Germany. In 2018, a U.S. District Court in New York heard the first oral arguments between. This is 2018, so this is like current events. The U.S. District Court in New York had their first oral arguments between a representative of the Herero and Nama people and representative of the German government in a case demanding for reparation for damages for what has been termed the first genocide of the 20th century. Wow. This is genocide. And it says apartheid in Namibia. Apartheid was an oppressive political system and a social system of institutionalized racial segregation existed in South Africa and Southwest Africa, which is Namibia, from 1948 until the 1990s. During the era of white minority rule, apart from the practice in South Africa, few people, even Africans, are aware of apartheid, was particularly in African countries such as Namibia. So, a lot of people talk about apartheid in South Africa. They know about apartheid in South Africa, but they're not aware that it was happening in other countries. And they're talking now about how it was happening in Namibia. And so she does go on to talk about. I'm gonna see if I can get a little bit more quickly through some of these things, because I know I highlighted so much information, and I want to get through some of the points. But it does say. Let's see. That Southwest Africa was under South African rule for 75 years. That's from 1915 to 1990. So it was subject to whatever the rule was happening of South Africa. So that means it was doing under the same apartheid regime that was happening in South Africa. And it says the country is exceptionally rich in minerals such as uranium, vanadium, lithium, tungsten, and diamonds. This motivated South Africa to hold on to Namibia throughout many years of revolution from 1966 to 1990. South African apartheid laws extended to Namibia, where the laws prevented black Namibians from having any political, social, and economic freedoms. The main goal of white South Africa's rule over Namibia was to create opportunity for white South Africans to exploit Namibia's mineral resources. Okay, so during Namibia's struggle for independence, white South Africans used well-known British guerrilla tactics to undermine the locals. So a lot of people think of guerrilla tactics as like, the rebellion and like people fighting back. But this is actually started by the colonizers. This is something that was happening and brought about by the Europeans that were starting this guerrilla warfare. Okay, so just so that we're clear on that, to undermine the locals, British guerrilla South Africans were well known. White South Africans used well-known British guerrilla tactics to undermine the locals. It took 24 years of revolt and guerrilla warfare for Namibia to gain its independence from white South Africans. During these years, between 20,000 and 25,000 people were killed. Namibia finally achieved political independence on March 21st, 1990. All right, we're going to go on from South Africa to Kenya, a country that is very close to my heart. It's like the first country that I started with, that the country that led me to begin my path on research, and also like the country that I feel I'm called to do work in. Like, that's where I feel called. So it's important to talk about this subject here, which is the Mau Mau Rebellion. And so the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, during the Berlin Conference, Kenya was given to the British, who ruled the country until it gained independence in 1963. The Mau Mau uprising between 1952 and 1960 was a war in Kenya which started because the Kikuyu people wanted to reclaim their land from the British colonizers. In response to the rebellion, between 320,000 to 450,000 Kikuyus were moved into concentration camps. Okay, weren't the British fighting concentration camps when the Germans had put people in concentration camps in the World Wars? The British people were also had their own concentration camps, and that was okay. In response to the rebellion, between 320 and 450 Kikuyus were moved to concentration camps. Also, Americans had concentration camps, remember that too. While 1 million of them were held in enclosed villages. So they were held basically, what do they call that when people are imprisoned at home, in their own home, and just forced to stay in their enclosed village, which I'm sure was guarded by military. A great number of Africans were gruesomely murdered. Those who supported the Mau Mau rebels were tortured by having this is hard. So sensitive content alert. If anybody don't listen to this with small children. Don't listen to this with young people. This is serious, like inhumane. I don't even know what to call it. It's just inhumanity what happened. So just keep that in mind. Those who supported the Mau Mau rebels were tortured by having their ears sliced off and holes bored into their eardrums. Others were either bludgeoned to death or set on fire. Others frequently used gruesome methods of torture, which was castration, mutilation of testicles through squeezing and crushing them. Some of them had their genitalia and other body parts cut off and left to bleed to death. Many were brutally tortured with pins and hot metal rods to extract information from them about the growing insurgency of Kenyans seeking independence. This is people just trying to seek independence, and they're being tortured beyond imagination. Women are choked and held underwater. Men were dragged behind Land Rovers, whipped, burned, and bayoneted. They forced men to dig their own graves and lined them up in front of the graves and shot them. British savagely tortured Kenyans in concentration camps. Women were raped and physically abused in front of their husbands, in front of their children, and some men were dismembered one body part at a time until they bled to death. The British were on a murderous campaign to eliminate the Kikuyu people, and they went out of their way to conceal the atrocities. This is during Queen Elizabeth's rule. FYI. The British were on a murderous campaign to eliminate the Kikuyu people. I know that they have a prime minister, but I'm just saying this was happening. They worked together. They later went out of their way to conceal the atrocities against the Kikuyu. These crimes against humanity are yet to be prosecuted. There's a strong case to be made by the Kenyans against the British, thanks to the relentless lawyers and historians who were persistent in pursuing the issue in search of justice. On June 6, 2013, the British Foreign Secretary William Hague, or Hague, I'm not sure how, it's Hague. I'm sure that's Hague, probably. Read a statement in the British Parliament announcing an unprecedented agreement to compensate the 5,228 Kenyans who were tortured, abused, and killed by British during the Kikuyu uprising to each receive a pittance of £3,800. He proceeded to state that Britain sincerely regrets that these abuses took place. So imagine having your genitalia cut off and being paid $5,000. Or imagine having a relative raped and shot in front of you and being paid $5,000 for your damages. That seems like a spit in the face to me, but that's just my opinion. It was the first time that Britain had admitted carrying out the torture anywhere in its former colonies. At least it was admitted. I think that is better than the so-called compensation that they paid. The compensation is kind of ridiculous, especially for the amount of people who were killed. It does have images. It's unfortunate that there are images, but it's proof. It's like visual, physical proof of people who were killed, of people tied up, of people held by British soldiers. And you can see the British soldiers. So there's that. All right, so we're moving on to King Leopold II and the Congo Free State. I hate talking about King Leopold. He makes me if anyone makes me sick, it's King Leopold. But we have to do this because it's important. Congo Free State was the Central African nation privately owned by King Leopold II of Belgium. German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck and King Leopold were very close friends and allies. Bismarck supported King Leopold's bid to keep the Congo because he had already started invading Congo before the Berlin Conference, so he was out to keep it during the Berlin Conference. Let's see. Easily covering, this is talking about the Congo itself, it's easily covering a significant 1/10 of the entire expanse of the tropics in Africa. So the Congo is 1/10 of tropical land in Africa. That's a big chunk of land, and it's rainforest. I think that's widely known. But yes, it's a very lush. It's a rainforest. It's just a lush land. And it says the Congo is the continent's second largest country. It's right there in the middle of Africa, and it has the largest mineral reserves in all of Africa. So like someplace that's lush, someplace that's full of vegetation and full of fertile soil, it's gonna have resources. Sorry, I had to check if anyone was coming. In the 23 years that King Leopold ruled over the Congo, and that is from 1885 to 1908, he massacred over 10 million Africans. Leopold's rule of Congo was one of the most barbaric eras of European domination of Africa. The irony about Leopold is that he never set foot in Congo, so he was orchestrating this from afar. He was telling his soldiers what to do. He was telling his military what to do, and they were doing it. And it says typically if any African failed to meet his rubber quota, so this is a time where rubber was just popping off, like bikes were being made all over the place. People were experimenting for the first vehicles to come out, and so there was a high demand for rubber, and rubber was recently I learned this from before, but rubber at that time was recently discovered for its multiple uses and like how valuable this thing was, especially that they're now making tires from it. And it says typically if an African failed to meet his rubber quota, and rubber comes from trees. I don't know if everyone knows that, but there are rubber trees. It produces like this liquid thing, and then I don't know what they do with it to manufacture it, but they take this rubber, which is like this. It's like this syrupy type of liquid that comes from rubber trees, and then they use it and they make everything that's made with rubber out of it. And so, if the African failed to meet the rubber quota for the day from the rubber plantations, the Belgian master would cut off his hand, his child's hand and foot as a way of making him work harder. So imagine like, if you don't work hard enough, we're gonna chop off the hand of your baby, or we're gonna chop off the foot of your baby. And it says the laborer did not improve his productivity. His children would be killed and brought to him as tokens. And other times, the laborer's wife would be killed, and the laborer would be forced to eat her remains. This would destroy the man's life. You cannot imagine how that would affect someone's mind, and leave him totally defeated. His fellow African laborers, in witnessing this gruesome ordeal, were also totally defeated. You talk about PTSD. All this was done to strike terror in the hearts of the Africans so that they could work harder and deliver the rubber that Leopold so desperately wanted in Belgium. And there are physical images of children and young people with their hands cut off. It shows a man just looking just devastated and just gone, and he's in front of these little hands that are chopped off in front of him, and a child's foot in front of him. And this is a picture taken of this man as he's seeing his child's hands and foot in front of him, and this is in 1904. It also shows people in chains in Congo, slaves in chains in Congo. Alright, that's all it talks about Leopold. That's enough about Leopold. He's evil person. We all know where he is right now. And says human zoos in Belgium and most of Europe and in the Americas. So this section is about the human zoos. It says Leopold in the Congo did not end with his love for still have to talk about this man, his love for rubber. He also took some of the Africans to Belgium, where he established a human zoo in Belgium. Here, Africans were displayed like animals in cages for the enjoyment of European audiences. These were called ethnological exhibitions, which were very popular in world fairs across Europe, where they were institutionalized for almost a century of human zoos. It says in 1877, 12 Nubians are exhibited in the French Zoological Gardens in Paris. 12 Nubians in Paris, just on display. It says during the exhibit, Nubians are touched, measured, and undressed like animals. In 1891, 50 Amazon women from Dahomey. Dahomey was in Benin. This is where a lot of slaves come from. This is where part of my ancestral background comes from, and I'm sure if you do a DNA test and if you have an African background and you're an African American, you probably have ancestors from Benin as well. So it says 50 Amazon women, which were the warriors. I mean, they were called Amazon women, but these were actual female warriors who fought for their king in Dahomey. And it says the kingdom is in present-day Benin, and they were displayed at the Zoological Garden in Paris. In 1896, about 100 Africans from Cameroon and Togo were exhibited at the Human Zoo in Germany. It says 1897, 260 Congolese women and children were put on display at a human zoo in Belgium, in the town of Tervuren. And it says Africans were locked up in cages with signs that said, It is forbidden to feed the blacks. In 1940s, the Africans from Angola and Mozambique were packed in cages in tropical gardens in Lisbon for the entertainment and pleasure of the Portuguese. It shows images of people being displayed at human zoos. It even shows like the visitors lined up to see these people. And in Belgium, in Benin, um, another one in Belgium, it shows this little boy in a bird cage. He must be 2 or 3 years old, and these little girls that are European girls that are just right next to him, kind of laughing about it. And the boy he's just in a bird cage, and it shows a human being at a human zoo exhibit, 1906 at the Bronx Zoo. This is in New York City. This is the zoo that I went to growing up and into my adulthood. As long as I lived in New York, I've been to the Bronx Zoo, and I had no idea they ever had a human exhibit. They had a human exhibit. It says during the 1899 Universal exhibit in Paris, about 400 Africans are displayed. Among them was King Dinah Salifu, the king of the Nalubaga people from Guinea. Exhibiting an African king at this repugnant exhibit was the ultimate humiliation, of course, for the captured Africans. During the same time, can you imagine they captured a king and put him on exhibit? During the same time in Paris, 28 Angolans were also on display in Paris. It says the French referred to the Africans as bees, and it says King Leopold, along with other colonizers and millions of European citizens, ridiculed and humiliated the Africans for almost a century. African men, women, and children were represented as subhuman speechless objects. And it says what is most amazing is how millions of seemingly normal European people for almost a century found this grotesque, despicable, disgusting, gross violation of human rights as simply great entertainment and saw absolutely nothing wrong with it. And it's still, I think it boggles anyone's mind who hears about it. And I think that's why they were trying so hard to prove that we weren't human, is so they can say, oh, they're not human, it's okay. But it's like for almost a century this was going on. It says using an international charitable, this is who are we talking about here? King Leopold. And what he was doing was he was using the guise of charity. And I think that was a very popular thing to do during this time. I'm not going to go through all the explanation of it in the book, but I want to talk about it because the way that colonization worked a lot of the times, they used many tactics. All right, it's funny if you look in the correlation of invention of certain advanced weaponry and a lot of movements that happened. They're very close in time. When you look at when guns are invented, okay, and you start to see, all right, this is around the time that slavery started happening. And then when you look at the time machine guns started getting invented, oh, this is about the time that colonization was happening. It's like you're seeing that there's a correlation between advanced weaponry and these sorts of things that are happening. But another tactic that they used was missionary. And this is how they were able to scope the land and find where the resources are and scout the land and get in comfortable enough to then plan their attacks. So one of the things that King Leopold did was he sent out this missionary charity. He used this charitable front as he ran his private property and brutal business investment. So Jules Marcarl, a prominent Belgian diplomat and historian, estimates that Leopold made today's equivalent of $1.1 billion in profits from the Congo. So Leopold, being in the Congo, he took $1.1 billion in his lifetime, or what is equivalent to today in $1.1 billion. His so-called charity, which was his quote-unquote missionary, um, in the death resulted in the death of over 10 million Congolese, approximately 75% of the population of the Congo at that time. So, how can you claim to be doing missionary work and you killing 75% of the people? I don't know. King Leopold and the rest of the colonizers used Christianity to subdue the Africans. In general, the colonizers would send missionaries ahead of the settlers. The missionaries, this is why there's such a, but we need to know this. It doesn't matter what your faith is, especially if you're a Christian, you should know this. And since the missionaries were given strict instructions to get the Africans to accept Christianity so that they would not revolt against the occupiers, who were usually came behind the missionaries once the Africans were felt to have been subdued sufficiently. When abused, the missionaries taught the Africans to turn the other cheek. Okay, it says in 1883, a letter to the colonial missionaries in the Congo, King Leopold stressed the following manipulative points, which were designed to brainwash the Africans. Below are excerpts from his letter. So I want you guys to fully grasp this. This is a letter written in 1883. So this is the actual excerpts from King Leopold II writing to his missionaries and telling them what to do. Okay, so it says, Reverends, fathers, and dear compatriots, the task, I'm gonna abbreviate some of the harsh language that he's using, and I'll just, you'll know you'll know when I get there. It says the task is given to you to fulfill is very delicate and requires much tact. You will go certainly to evangelize, but your evangelization must inspire above all Belgium interests. The principal objective in the Congo is not to teach inwards to know God. He says the full thing, just so you know. And it says, through the pagan gods, they all know not that to kill, to commit adultery, to lie, and to insult is bad. So he knows that these people already have moral conscience. He knows that. It says, have courage to admit it. You are not going to teach them what they already know. Just so you know, African people already had moral values long before the missionaries got there. Your essential role is to interpret the gospel only in a way that will protect your interests in Africa. So that is objective. That right there. That is, what's the word I'm looking for? Motive. That's the word I'm trying to get at. Ensure that the savages do not realize the full potential of the richness of their land. Use the gospel to encourage the natives to love poverty. Highlight biblical texts like happier are the poor because they will inherit the kingdom of heaven. So, just like in the United States, these so-called missionaries were not giving them the entire... This is why everyone needs to really read the whole Bible from beginning to end. Because these missionaries were given specific texts to read to these people that they were quote unquote ministering to. Same as slaves were given specific texts that were going along with the motives of the people who were giving them to them. Anyway, I digress. Let's keep going. Happy are the poor because they will inherit the kingdom of heaven. And it says it's very difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. So they're specifically giving them these things. It says you must singularly insist on their total submission and obedience. Teach the Africans only to read and not to reason. Evangelize the inwards, does say the full thing, in such a way that they stay forever in submission to you. Every day, make them recite, happy are those who are weeping, because the kingdom of God is for them. This is so evil, I cannot... There's also a scripture, like, read it for yourself. When you're using the scripture, like, for evil interests, then you will get what's coming to you. It's beyond evil. Like, when you read the scripture, you know the devil himself uses scripture. That's enough for us to know this is evil. Like, do not feel that because missionaries were used in this evil way, that means that the whole Bible is corrupt. It means that even the devil knows the scriptures. In another letter, the missionaries in the same year, 1883, Leopold says, always convert the blacks by using a whip, keep the women in 9 months of submission to work freely for us, make sure that the inwards never become rich, brainwash them that it is impossible for the rich to enter heaven. So he is giving the missionaries these orders. Make them pay tax each week at Sunday Mass. Use the money meant for the poor to rebuild flourishing business centers. For who? Who do you think? Institute a confessional system that allows you to be good detectives, denouncing any black that has a different consciousness contrary to that of you, the decision maker. So that tells you right there. The confessional was meant for the specific purpose to know what people are doing. This is not something that Jesus directed anyone to do. This is not something that God directed. The confessionals that they have in the Catholic Church, that is like, they say this is the reason. There's a reason for it. They have it so that they can be, it allows you to be good detectives. Read it for yourself. Teach the N-words to forget their heroes and to adore only ours. That is what they use in the United States, for fact. Never present a chair to a black person that comes to visit you. Never invite him for dinner, even if he gives you a chicken each time you visit him. King Leopold would go down in history as one of the most evil men that ever walked the earth. That is a fact. And it just goes on to, and it talks about how he orchestrated, again, the massacre of over 10 million people. And it says, the Bamilek French War, and the Forgotten War in the Cameroon. So let's see, we have a couple of more points to go over. We are almost through with this chapter. I know it's a hard one to read, but it's important. I remember we're on chapter 5 in Africa 101, the Wake Up Call. Just read the highlights. You want to get it for yourself on Kindle. It's only $10, and you're going to be able to see all these photographs, which I feel like you need to see just to let it sink in that this is real stuff we're reading about here. It says, in the 1950s and 60s, the Bamilek people of Cameroon revolted against the French. So in the 50s and 60s, there was a revolt. The French responded by waging a vicious war against the Bamilek people. They tortured and killed over 10,000 Cameroonians. The French proceeded to destroy all evidence of their horrific crimes against the Bamilek people. To date, most people are not aware of this war. And there is photographic evidence. Even though the French tried to hide this, there's photographic evidence of French soldiers with the decapitated heads of the Cameroonians. And you need to know, this is real stuff. The photo given to me by a family member of a freelance photographer. That's a picture of the French soldiers with the heads of Cameroonians on spikes. It says this photo was taken by the family member who witnessed this particular event in 1975. It just baffles me how recent this is. 1975, French soldiers are literally decapitating African people and displaying their heads on spikes. According to the freelance photographer who is still alive, the soldiers would go to the church with their wives on Sunday. After church, the men would go out and behead Africans just for fun. So these soldiers, French soldiers, were going to church on Sunday and then going through the villages and decapitating people. It says, I still struggle to understand how seemingly normal people would engage in such despicable, inhumane acts. And yet, the same people who went out of their way to prove that black people are subhuman. These are the same people. The problem is that too many of us do not even realize that we are wounded, let alone we have a fresh wound that is still in need of healing. The systematic brainwashing and the rule of divide and conquer remain alive and well among us to this day. The sense of inferiority among us, the Africans, is automatically passed from generation to generation. We literally stuck on stupid because we have been programmed to believe, even in the most blatant lies. it's true. I mean, she's like yelling at us to listen now. She's like, stop like blinding yourselves. If the white man said it, it must be true, and that's what we see in our textbooks. What is the most disturbing in our is our inability to push back against the lies. The majority of us simply accept the lies without challenging them. And I think this people don't understand how important it is to just go ahead and do your own research, because school is not adequate. It's not, especially on a basic level. It's not adequate. It says it is quite amazing how a whole race could have been put to sleep for so long. The solution is simple. We need the courage to stand up and push back. To successfully challenge the status quo, we must first and foremost unshackle our minds through knowledge and understanding of our history. And once the mind is free, we understand that as Black people, we are not inferior to anyone. The rest of the journey will be a lot easier battle. Let us be courageous. We must stand up, unite, and defend our turf. And it goes on to talk about like, let me see. I'm trying to figure out how much more to go through. Oh boy. This is a lot. How far am I in? We've been on for an hour. Oh my gosh. Alright. I think I'm wondering if I should just kind of give it a pause, or if you know what, I'm going to try and see what we can do here. Because, let's see. Stolen artifacts. Let's talk a little bit about this. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing. I'm just gonna kind of go through some of it. So, let's see. It's talking about the skulls that have been taken by many different countries, but also not only skulls, but artifacts. There's so much. People are asking them back for proper burial. It's estimated that 90-95% of Africa's cultural heritage is held outside Africa by major museums, by France alone having over 90,000 objects and human remains from sub-Saharan Africa. That's disgusting, France. Give it back. Why is United Nations, our international body of nations, which is supposed to be watching the watchdog for human rights, abuses around the world, is sleeping? So she's saying that the United Nations is sleeping while these abuses are happening. The world must demand answers from the UN. A united Africa, through the African Union, must also file a formal complaint with the UN against the former colonizers. So you really need to read this whole chapter, because there's a lot more of information about what's happening. It says religious or sacred objects are not exempt from the loot. To the rear of an altar, Henry VII's Ladies' Chapel, in Westminster Abbey, London, is a looted inlaid sacred tablet. The wooden or stone replicas of the tablets of which the Ten Commandments are inscribed, it says, almost is among the hundreds of objects looted in 1868 from Magdala in northern Ethiopia by the British. So that's despicable. It talks about Saartjie Baartman. If you haven't heard of her, she's the woman that had the really large, just crazy large buttocks. But they put her on display. She only lived to be, how old? From 1789 to 1815. So from 89 to 99 to 09. She was only like 26 years old when she died. And they put her body on display. She says, when she died, her body was dissected, her genitalia and brains were placed in jars, but her skeleton was put on display at France's Museum of Man. In 1994, President Nelson Mandela, and he requested her remains be sent back to South Africa. The French government took years to acquiesce this request, and Baartman's remains were finally sent back home to South Africa in 2002, where she received a proper burial. Finally, in 2002? She died in 1815. That's ridiculous. So it also talks about the Algerian liberation. So Algerians were literally when they were fighting for during their fight for independence, the French soldiers would fly them in helicopters and tie cement blocks to their feet and pushed them out of the helicopters. And any ones that were floating on the surface of the ocean, they called them Bijar's shrimps, which were the name of one of the flight captains who were helping to capture these people and throw them out of helicopters. That was in Algeria, which is a largely like it's a northern African country. So I actually have ancestry from there too. So these are also my ancestors. All of these people are Malagasy uprising. Talks about the Malagasy people and how, let's see, I'm gonna try and go through this in French. The French occupied Madagascar. They raped the women, they killed the women and the children. In indiscriminate bomb attacks, they captured Madagascans in raids and thrown them into the ocean, just like they did in Algeria. Recent apologies. So there's a couple of apologies, so-called apologies. It says September 2001, European Union agreed to apologize for slavery and colonization. And it says in 2004, the German officially apologized for the atrocities. It says we Germans accept historic and moral responsibility and the guilt acquired by Germans at that time. And that was 2004. In addition, they admitted to the atrocities that were equivalent to genocide. Well, thank you for admitting that, but it says in September 2008. It's just it burns my brain and my soul. It says in 2018, the French President Macron acknowledged that France carried out systemic torture during Algeria and the Algeria War. And the French, you did a lot more than that. Anyway, it says the French president, he admitted that they carried out systemic torture during the Algeria War for independence. This acknowledgement came after 6 decades of secrecy and denial. 1.5 million Algerians died during this war. It goes on to say that the European Parliament passed a watershed solution, fundamental rights of people of African descent, calling for reparations for crimes against Africans during the era of European colonization. The bill additionally urges European members of state to introduce a series of sweeping reforms aimed to tackling structural racism millions of Afro-Europeans are currently experiencing. This will involve countries implementing strategies to deal with discrimination in education, health, housing, policing, and justicism and politics. I believe that this Parliament passed this resolution, but I don't believe it's been carried out. I've read it somewhere. So in many cases, documents pertaining to the atrocities committed by the colonizers were either destroyed or classified by colonial masters. The colonizers are being urged to declassify their colonial archives. That's happening now, especially the most horrendous phases of colonization, and issue public apologies. So this is what's being asked of them. More than a century after Belgium finally apologized for the kidnapping, segregation, deportation, and forced adoption of thousands of children born mixed race. Do you hear this? Children born mixed race were literally kidnapped and deported. And they issued an apology. Prime Minister offered an apology in 2019 during for deporting and kidnapping mixed race children. This was the first time Belgium took any responsibility for the immense harm it afflicted. All right. So in the conclusion, it says this is our story, and yes, this is our struggle, but for how long? We have arrived at the dawn of a new era. We will no longer be subservient. We will no longer be exploited. We will no longer be dehumanized. We will no longer be silenced. And it says, the time has come for us to confront colonialism and its evils head on. The children of Africa must arise and let the world know, once and for all, that enough is enough. All right, and that is chapter 5, y'all. That's a lot. That's a mouthful. I know I tried to rush through the last parts of it. I didn't even get to read all of my highlights. I had a lot more highlighted, but that's the gist of it. That's a lot for one chapter. So you guys know why I wasn't able to get through all of it so quickly, but it's important. And I just want to thank you guys for being with me and for watching with me. And get the book, man. Africa 101, The Wake Up Call. Arikana chi hambori kwao. Thank you for your I want to call this what's the word I need? This is like a whole this is a this is such a this is a ministry. This whole book is a ministry. It's like teaching us. This is important. There's a quote here by Jomo Kenyatta. He's the first the first president of independent Kenya. And it says, when the missionaries arrived, the Africans had the land and the missionaries had the Bible. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened them, they had the land and we had the Bible. That's by Jomo Kenyatta. It says, we prefer poverty and liberty than riches and slavery. I say, let's have riches and liberty because, damn it, we deserve it. That's a lot. There's all of this. There's a lot of resources. I'm glad that she puts the resources after every chapter, and she even goes on to give you recommended reading so you can read specifically about some of the wars that she mentioned, and she even gives links to like all these things about the zoos and everything. So definitely go back, read the chapter, read it in full. And that law, I don't want to end without clarifying this. Let's look it up. Someone please help me look this up. The fundamental rights of people of African descent. This is a watershed resolution, P8 _ TA, and in abbreviations it says 2019 and 0239. I want to know if this has actually been, it says it's been passed. I want to know if it's actually taken into any effect at all. I don't know that it has. I don't think that it has. But please go ahead and look that up. It's supposed to be in March 2019. It says European Parliament passed this. How come we're not? How come it feels like none of that has really been carried out? Because there's a lot of times things are promised and then nothing happens. Just like the 40 acres and a mule that we're still waiting for. So again, thank you for joining me. Happy Juneteenth. Stay woke out there. Read, learn, start with this book, Africa 101, The Wake Up Call, and I'll see you guys next time. Be grateful, live balanced, be yourself, and happy Juneteenth. Bye-bye.